Thank you for that introduction. That was very nice. J'aimerais remercier la comité de programmation pour ce colloque et puis de m'avoir donné l'opportunité de parler de mon travail. It's really an honor to be here. I was saying to Lorenz earlier that I generally speak to either artist communities or to academic communities, and this is really a community that's been absolutely vital to the last 2 or 3 projects I've been involved in. Today, what I want to do is talk to you about 2 projects, the Leona Drive project, which I produced in 2009, and this was a project that took place in the north of Toronto in a suburb called Willowdale, and it involved taking over 6 vacant bungalows. And the other project I want to talk about is Landslide, Possible Futures. Both of those projects involve history in some way, and I'm really interested in working with history and with archives for lots of reasons, but one is that when you use history, it provides an entry point for a diversity of different communities. It can be cross-generational and cross-cultural. So history is also an important framework from which to conceptualize any sense of future urban planning. All right, so now I said this is my... Okay, so just before I get started, I'm not gonna, I had a whole spiel on digital media and the inherent characteristics of digital media and what digital media enables, but I think, you know, going through the program, you've had lots of examples of that. What these exhibitions that I'm gonna talk about will do is really give examples of different ways in which digital media provide new forms of collaboration, new kinds of interfaces between the physical built environment and the virtual world. David Poole was talking about that, the fact that that split between virtual and real is no longer as important or is really bleeding. And many artists are actually working right at that boundary, right at that intersection where the physical world engages with images. And there's a number of projects, recent projects that deal with archives in this way and that explore that interface between the virtual and the real. One is called Archival Dialogues, which was the inaugural show for the Ryerson Image Arts Center that was curated by Doina Popescu and Peggy Gale. And this is an image from that show that invited 8 artists to engage with the Black Star Archive. It's a photographic archive that spans the 20th century. Black Star was a photo company. So it gives you, that collection gives you a sense of the whole 20th century. And what Doina and Peggy did in inviting artists to engage with the archive is essentially animate the archive, allow the archive to live and be interpreted. And this I find exciting. So with this particular piece, Michael Snow, that crazy artist, whose work is always humorous and funny, only not everybody knows that, created a classroom and projected slides, actually not true, he projected slides and then videotaped that projection, and it was him essentially going through the archive but wearing white gloves and showing you different images from the archive, and that got projected onto a classroom scene. So really giving you a sense of how images are split. And I can't see. This is another project by 2 artists in Toronto, Patrizio Davila and Dave Colangelo, who went into the Ontario archives and They dug some stuff out from the archives. This was an incredible dossier of somebody who had ridden around the world in the 30s, in the 20s and 30s, and documented his travels by bicycle. And so this was hidden away in the archives. And so Dave and Patrizio created a projection of films and photographs and diaries of this amazing around the world in 80-day trip by somebody from Brantford in the 1930s. So very, very exciting. Again, getting into the archives, animating the archives, making them come alive. Of course, the most spectacular exploration of archives is, of course, Robert Lepage's amazing Moulin à Images, which was put on to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the city of Quebec. And this is truly, this is a world's first. It was the largest projection in the world. I think 600 meters of these silos, 220 lumen projectors. This happened 2009, very important period in the history of digital media, because suddenly these projectors, and he was working with Christie, had the power to actually create these images, allow images to be projected on these architectural surfaces at great distances, but also computer technologies and now allowed the images to be mapped onto these architectural surfaces. It's an extraordinary experiment that was extended for 5 years and is in its last iteration this summer, starting in a few weeks. If you haven't seen it, I would suggest you see it. And what Lepage did is every year went into the archive and got more and more images. So this is very exciting, and it gives a sense that history and archives are not simply locked away, but they're things that are accessible and things that artists and spectators can engage with. Okay, in 2009, I was also involved in a project, but unlike Moulin à Images, it was much less spectacular. It was called the Leona Drive Project. And what I have been working with a group of PhD students, all of whom were brilliant artists, and we were studying cities. And suddenly we realized we're at York University. Actually, there's an incredible amount of development. The city is expanding in multiple directions out here. It's in the suburbs where the processes of urbanization are most visible and most critical. So let's start to do work in suburbs. And people assume suburbs are boring. Not so. So we started to do walks around Willowdale, Ontario, and we kept coming across streets upon streets where these 1940s bungalows would be completely boarded up, like this one, waiting for the developers to get their zoning applications approved. So it was sort of these streets that were in limbo, and we decided this would be fascinating and fabulous to stage an exhibition in this kind of milieu, a site-specific milieu. So we approached the municipal councillor, John Fillion, and he really did not understand what we were talking about. What do you mean art? What do you mean an art exhibition? But this was our key. I think we were working with Unionville High School, which is an arts high school in the area, and we had decided we would pair these 23 artists with high school students to create an intervention. And so it's the high school students really that opened the doors for us. Then Fillion connected us to a developer. Remember 2009, economic crisis, nothing is moving. So it was kind of like this guy David Laird was sort of easygoing and with wanted to please the counselor, and the counselor wanted to do something for the high school, and the high school is connected to families, and so you're in a community. So we got these houses approved. It was really hard. This was a really difficult project. There was no running water. There was no electricity. And we had to put it together within a very short time span because the houses were going to be demolished. So we had about 6 months, really, from winter into the fall to put it together. This is a piece by Kim Tomczak and Lisa Steele called Terminus. Only one of the houses, there were 6 houses, and the artist worked on the outside of the houses and created a kind of park garden, but only one of the houses we could use the inside. That was number 9. And So some of the artists focused on number 9. Richard Fung, video artist, began interviewing people in the area, the old-timers who had raised their children there. They're not called the old-timers. They're called the originals. Sorry, they're called the originals. And many of whom are women, and they actually have moved out of the houses, obviously, and most of them live in condos around, and so it was quite easy to track them down, and one knew the other, knew the other, knew the other, so we got involved in that community and were able to interview them about what it was like to live in Willowdale and raise a family at that time. Another group of artists, let's see if I can do that, actually. Here's my, because this is my media. Oh. Okay, another group of artists, Angela Jossie and Shanna McDonald, stayed at number 9, went down into the basement, and found the belongings of one Ruth Gillespie, who had lived in the house. Maybe we'll turn the sound down a bit. Who had lived in the house for 40 years. And many of her things were in the basement. So her old yearbook, tax returns, recipe books. And what you're seeing is a casserole, recipe for a casserole that the artists actually reproduced and remade, and then using projections, they represented that recipe book. But they wanted to give a sense, a structure, a feeling of Ruth Gillespie. And this exhibition received quite a lot of media attention, and we were actually able to reconnect with Ruth's family, her niece in particular, who was very upset that her uncle had left her aunt's belongings in the basement. So it's kind of a happy story. Other artists went and looked at the historical maps, so the maps were drawn onto buildings. They also went and found photographs from the library, just documented, because that whole area, as all suburbs, has gone through incredible changes. But there was this group of artists that were, they wanted to do history a different way, and they were not satisfied with maps and with photographs and with interviews. They brought in a medium. And so a medium came in and essentially channeled the spirit of Ruth Gillespie. So actually, I've never used this in a presentation, and when I went to insert it into the presentation, the image got all messed up, so I left it because it's kind of huru-guru or whatever.
You could walk down this street any time of the day and know that you were loved.
Okay, so that was a very important statement. And whether or not you believe in psychic phenomena, what was nice is that Franny Hoffman had simply come, she's from Florida, and she had come to this space and really had a physical impression or experience. And so we wanted to document that. There were lots of other media arts projects, but I'm not going to go into them all. The one that stole the show, I would say, was not a media arts project at all, but it was a sculpture by Antelieu, architect from the University of Toronto, who painted one of the houses green because he felt that the architecture resembled a little Monopoly piece, and that was a very interesting negotiation with the developer, because it was sort of like the deal that we had, and this is the deal that we have with the Markham Museum, is that yes, you can do whatever you want, but return it to its original state. And so this was kind of hard, because it's a lot of work to paint it green. And then to say we're going to paint a house green, he didn't understand, but when I said, the little Monopoly, he loved it, and he had photographs of this taken. But what was so interesting about this project, but about the whole project, for me, was that the community adopted it. The street adopted it. People gave regular tours. They came back. It wasn't something that belonged to us or to the artist. It was something really that belonged to Leona Drive. And I thought that as an exhibition, it was successful. You know, they always ask you, like, how do you, measure success? What was successful was that it went out to the rest of the city and attracted people, cool hipsters from the downtown actually came out to this little street in Willowdale. It also crossed generations. There were young kids. With this latest project, I'm getting questions like, do you have any family programming? It's like, no, we don't. These kinds of exhibitions, I think, I truly do, they cross generations because they're sensual, they're fun, they're enigmatic, and young and old really get something out of it. And there were a lot of gray-haired people who, even if they didn't have a connection to that place, were really interested in the particular history. And so that's why I was saying that history can cross boundaries and create what some curators are calling these experimental communities. And these are communities that would never come together. They're communities whose individual members have nothing in common except the exhibition that's in front of them, and yet are able to speak to each other about a particular kind of experience. From then, I wanted to continue this exploration because, that show was only really a very short period. It was 2 weeks. And just disappeared. I mean, the lasting effects were that the Willowdale and John Fillion have initiated the move to set up an arts council. There was a recognition that there needs to be support for the arts, but I really felt that the conversation around urban development had only gotten so far, and so I wanted to continue it. Oh, those are the houses that replaced them, the monster houses. So the next project is called Landslide Possible Futures. You can see where it is from a Google map in Markham. And Markham is just the north of Willowdale. And that is really, Markham is a new city, newly established city. It is really has one of the most progressive green prints in Canada. It's the most ethnically diverse new city in Canada, 65%. Francine Perinet is here, she could correct me if I'm wrong, but 65% of the population are not from Canada, mostly from East and South Asia. So this idea, I had first approached another developer to see if I could stage another exhibition in a subdivision of brand new houses. Okay, that was really hard. Because that was really, it was just like, I don't know. The developer was like, I don't know who you are, and I don't care about your stupid, history project. So, so then I kind of came up with this idea of like a pioneer village, and the houses themselves that are in this 25-acre pioneer village that has 30 houses dating from the 1820s to the 1920s and 80,000 artifacts, including diaries and letters and objects. That just might enable us to have a discussion about development, because some of the houses that are in that space are there because of development, because this Markham, to me, is just this line that keeps moving into infinity as agricultural lands are being eaten up. This is prime, rich land. And so the little houses, many of them were, it's like a survivalist. I see it as a survivalist camp. So I approached the museum, and I have to say that John Ryerson, and I was saying this to Lorenz earlier, was absolutely instrumental in making this happen, because it's very hard for somebody like me to connect to a city, because these projects are kind of weirdo projects. Site specificity is not really understood. The Markham Museum is not the Varley Art Gallery. The Markham Museum has no relationship really to contemporary modern art. And John Ryerson, who is in charge of culture for Markham, when I met him and I sort of mentioned this idea, he immediately, made the links. And I think cultural planning is so important for that. It just enables these kinds of projects to get off the ground. I just want to say that. So this is, I'll just tell you a little bit about the project. There you have a picture of the houses and what they're going to what they look like. I can't show you what they're going to look like because we're really in process. We're working with 33 artists, international, local, national, and this is the archive, and several of the artists are working with the objects in the archive. I'm working with a team that programs augmented reality applications so that there'll be a layer of augmented reality available for smartphones and Androids that will have information on each of the different projects. But I really wanted them to devise something for me that is going to engage with the data itself in the archive, because everything is being digitized. It's an incredible opportunity, all of these letters and postcards and photographs and objects. So they're going to make an algorithm that will, it's kind of a surrealistic algorithm that will pull 5 to 6 objects at a time and just set up these crazy juxtapositions, like an excerpt from a diary, a denture, a violin, and a letter. And all of these objects have stories. You know, they're rich, rich stories. They're rich media. So we'll see how that works. I have this is dealing with pioneer settler history, but also we're augmenting that history, as I'll talk about in a few minutes. But I have an original, not an original, a contemporary pioneer family, John Radojkovic and Lillian Burgess, who live in Owen Sound on a 100-acre mushroom farm. That doesn't sound right. On a 100, they grow shiitake mushrooms. I don't think the 100 acres is used for growing shiitake mushrooms, so that didn't sound right. But they, about 25 years ago, they moved out of Toronto, bought 100 acres of land, and have been living off the grid ever since. And they raised their 3 boys, who are now, 25 years old, and they have their own little mini subdivision on their 100 acres that their boys are building regularly. And these are all off-the-grid eco houses, and so they're going to come. They're not going to live at the museum, but they're going to create a house. And Lillian has this incredible diary of her experience of living off the grid. And so I want to juxtapose that with pieces of diaries that we have, weather diaries by women, which are very rare from the 19th century. So those will be available through the augmented reality application, but also there'll be light boxes throughout the whole site. So it'll be pretty full. That's an overview of the site. As I said, 30 artists. Most of the houses and buildings are going to be used for something. I pulled out Kamil Turner's project, Toronto artist, just because this is a digital media project. She is going to be creating a walk using phones, and what she's tracing is the history of slavery in southern Ontario. Jenny Suddick is born in Markham. People often ask, do you have any Markham artists? And we do. We have a number of people that grew up in Richmond Hill or Markham, and so understand the area really well. And Jenny is interviewing people that grew up in Markham and interviewing them about their walks. She's also gone back to her local high school and interviewing kids about their walks. Of course, these kids don't walk. So it is sort of to introduce them to the concept of walking. Philip Hoffman grew up in Kitchener, Ontario. He's going to be working in the slaughterhouse, and he actually worked for his family until he was about 20, Hoffman Meats, and worked in the slaughterhouse. So he was particularly attracted to this slaughterhouse. And let's see if I can pull up his. What he's doing with the slaughterhouse is I was trying to think of the word this morning, wood, holes in wood. And I'm sure there's a technical word. So he's taking the slaughterhouse and going to make it into a kind of cinematographic box. So you can walk around the slaughterhouse and you'll see different when you look through the peepholes, you'll see different strands of media. And he's working with GoPro, little tiny projectors that, you know, fit in the palm of your hand. And so there'll be projections all throughout the inside. He's also done a lot of work on the development in Southern Ontario, but also the loss of barns. It's a huge crisis around the world, actually. Ian Baxter is one of the most important contemporary artists in Canada, and he actually approached me when he heard about this project and wanted to do a maze, an ecological maze that is all about and. You know, Ian Baxter changed his name to Ian Baxter and it's all about relationality. And so at the center of this maze is an ampersand, and thinking about thoughts, words related to ecology and the environment. And he's working with kids at the high school. And the high school, as I was saying, very, very diverse, a lot of new immigrants. And so he wants them to come up with words for ecology, environment, and living together, sustainability. And it's going to be in 3 or 4 different languages embedded into the maze. And mazes are really beautiful things. They're reflective structures. So we're hoping that it's a place for communities, families, individuals to come together and experience things. I'm nearing the end of my list of artists, but this is a very important project by the Chinese artist Xu Tan. As I noted earlier, we're working with a number of Chinese artists, both from Toronto and Markham, but also who are coming from Hong Kong or Shenzhen or Beijing. Xu Tan has done these projects with Chinese communities, diasporic Chinese communities, in San Francisco, Frankfurt, and now Markham. And what he essentially does is he wants to understand what happens to these communities when they migrate. So, you know, what is the language, what is the culture that ensues? And so he's been doing a number of workshops with members of the Chinese community, asking them about words, language, experiences, dreams. Why did they come to Markham? And for Landslide, he's creating a pavilion. You can see this is a kind of sketch of these 2 half circles. He's creating an echo wall that will be made out of tarps, and you can whisper your secret into the wall at one end, and it'll be heard at the other end. But it's a pavilion, and so he's curating members of the Chinese community. There's an Elvis impersonator group that he wants to bring in, not-for-profit. He's very interested in all the not-for-profit stuff from the Chinese community. Chefs, cooks, immigration counselors. So they'll all be coming in and performing or talking about what it is that they do. And then ongoing, he's connected with the youth in Markham, Chinese youth who are part of bands. And so there's going to be ongoing performances of their music. It's going to be a really noisy exhibition. I have to think about how to do that. All right, this is a sci-fi. This was actually at Nuit Blanche last year. It's probably the most digital, sci-fi, crazy data visualization machine you will ever see, called Quasar 4.0, which is essentially visualizing data from the Arctic, the melting Arctic, but also data from the Greenbelt. And the Greenbelt's a very important component of the exhibition, and trying to educate people through this visualization about all the good things, the 1.8 million hectares of Greenbelt, all the great things that the Greenbelt is doing for water and for air. And so we wanted, through the AR app especially, to educate people about the importance of the Greenbelt, which is up for review in 2015. So we want to make sure that, you know, to tie the exhibition into the Greenbelt. And last of my examples is a project called Key to the New World by the great Cuban artist Rene Francisco. And this is not a digital project, it's a relational sculpture in the shape of a key and a dance floor at the center. And he wants to have world music going on throughout the 3 weeks, but dance lessons, teaching people how to dance Cuba style. So the music's all different, but the dance itself is Cuban. So this is history. as a public art exhibition, which is site-specific. So site-specific meaning it's almost like a vivisection. You engage with the historical, material resonances of a place, which is multi-sectoral. We're working with the City of Markham, the Markham Museum, Unionville High School, and we're also working with different cultures. So we've been doing a lot of work with outreach, so different cultural communities, to find ways to involve them. It's collaborative and it's pedagogical. Throughout the 3 weeks, we're gonna have dinners pairing celebrity chefs with farmers from the Greenbelt. We're going to have workshops on urban planning to try to rethink what density means. It doesn't have to be vertical or horizontal. There are different definitions and meanings of density. There'll be artist talks going on every day. So hopefully it'll be it's going to be an experience. I have no idea what is going to happen, which is part of the experimental nature of these kinds of exhibitions. You know, it is sort of setting things up. I don't even know what the artists are going to do, because with site-specific work, the way that you curate it is you ask for proposals. The proposals you get are very vague. They're usually like 1 or 2 paragraphs with a general budget. So I don't know, you know, I've been asked, you know, what do you do when you get a real dog of a piece? And I really work with the artist to try to bring it to a certain level. But I think what happens in a show like this, which is what happened with Leona Drive, is that the exhibition itself is so enmeshed. It's a web of connections and relationalities that, you know, even though there might be 1 or 2 pieces that pop and that the media like, generally people experience them all together. And so the way that it's curated is as a kind of experience, as a conversation. So I think I'll end there, and thank you for your attention.